Cheers.
Hello and welcome back to the, official second preseason episode of SuperCoach Edge, even though it's technically the third because we split the first into two parts just because it was so long. But this episode, we'll be talking about all things defence as I welcome in you, Liam, my trusty co-host. How goes it?
Yeah, thanks, Damon. Yeah, third episode, I feel like. It's weird. It was a weird one. I was reading the run sheet and I was like, I don't know what we should be saying here. But I'm excited.
It felt like the last episode was almost like an all-nighter. Like I think we recorded. It was
like 1 o'clock.
By the time we finished, 1 o'clock. It was a marathon, and you could probably tell if you tuned in for those episodes that our brains were running on empty. We were stumbling, and you were yawning at one stage as well, which is quite funny.
Yawn.
Yep, good yawn at the end as well. So it was well timed. Good way to end it. Put a bow on it.
Sorry, guys. No yawning tonight.
No, that's it. Well rested.
If you're tuning in for the first time, obviously welcome. But you can find us across your social channels via Twitter at SuperCoach_Edge, David at DavidJ88, myself at LiamEvans_95, Facebook and Instagram. You can find us on SuperCoach Edge. If you search that, and on YouTube, you can subscribe. And get the full experience, not just the audio, but get to hear and see us, and the stunning visuals that Damon has put together.
Guys, thank you. Just trying to up our game and go to the next level. You know, as they say, at the start of a preseason, we're burning up the track. We've come back in the best shape that we've ever been in our third season of SuperCoach. So now ready and raring to go now. Last episode, of course, which is broken into the two parts, we did analyse the midfield. So if you are tuning in and you missed those two parts, technically the first episode, first and second, whatever you want to call it, feel free to jump back and listen to that podcast, or alternatively, check it out on YouTube, as you mentioned. Because that episode was a massive one, like we alluded to. We discussed a whopping 34 players, and we'll be doing likewise for the defence and breaking it down player by player. I think we've got about 25 players, so not as much. So hopefully you're not yawning by the end like both of us were by the end of the record. So we're going to be looking at which of the premos, in this case in defence, present the most value, who presents the most upside, which mid-prices could be on the cusp of breakout year potentially, and which rookies are, we're keeping an eye on before we see any exposed form in the preseason. Of course, we've got our SuperCoach Edge patented crystal ball, which we'll be delving into and looking deeply into, but there's only so much that we can predict before we see any exposed form, but all that and more. So what do you say, Liam? Let's jump into it.
Let's go.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Alrighty, Liam, you can kick us off with the highest rated player in terms of, I guess, average and price from last year.
Yeah, that is Jack Sinclair. I remember bringing him in. It was fun when you brought him in because he just absolutely killed it. Yeah. 626.2K. Let's be honest, at that price for a defender, probably not much value there in terms of you're not getting very cheap. He's obviously potentially slightly overs. In 2021, he did have an 86.3 average, and obviously a combined average of 100 over the past 2 years. If we discount the 20 season when he wasn't, when he hadn't really broken out or settled into that rebounding role at that stage. Obviously, going to have some questions of him now that he's got a new coach in the form of Ross Lyon. And the question is going to be, what does the game, how does the game plan change for St Kilda? Does it change? Does it not change? You'd expect it would. But does this affect Sinclair's role? Will he be more accountable, playing less of that rebound, loose play role that really helped his scoring? I think that's the concern that I think I have, especially when you're paying up that much for him. So he isn't in my side. I have bypassed him based off that, really. On the other hand, though, there is a big upside, and that is that he did turn up in 19 of 2020 of 22 games in 22, among the best of any player really across any line. It was a really good run. But only 5 of those games, he might have turned up quite a consistent probably floor there, but not necessarily the really strong ceiling that you probably want, because then he had about 5 games where he went above 120 and 15 were 110. So it is still a decent sort of ceiling for a defender especially, but you obviously would love to see more 120 plus scores. He only obviously dipped below 81. So yeah, very nice floor there with him. His buy does come in round 12, which is the first buy. So you could potentially look to hold off starting him and just sort of let him simmer a little bit, let him cook.
Tasty chook.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's
Jack Sinclair
in the oven, rotating slowly. His body temperature has risen to over 400 degrees. He's literally stewing in his own juices.
Hopefully drop down in price. And then, yes, pick him up a little cheaper. A little bit of a discount there. So I guess that's sort of would be my plan. I'd consider him, but I think he's sort of I'd really want to see something in the preseason that says get him. But even then, I'd probably going to hold off and look to pick him up later on in the season. Once we get a bit more of an understanding of what St Kilda's game plan is and how that affects his scoring.
Yeah, I totally agree there. You've touched on the major points there in terms of having that super high floor. Dipping only once below 80 is crazy.
Yeah, it's massive.
And at least, like if you're paying that price, that maximum price, you're getting that security that comes with it. So that's the major positive to take out of it. But I think I'm very much the same. I'm willing to go for a little bit more value at this stage at the start of the year. Let him drop, let him cook, as you said. Just let him baste in his own juices potentially, and then you can go and start picking at him and having yourself a nice little juicy meal. Now I'm getting hungry, even though I just eaten. But yeah, I'm going to opt to wait as well when it comes to Jackie Sinclair. Next up, we have James Sicily, the Sicilian. He's not Sicilian, but we'll call him Sicilian. He's priced at 624.7K. In terms of value, I would say he's probably on par for value. He's got an combined average over the past 2 years of 108.2, discounting, of course, that ACL year that he had. In terms of his buy, he's got the round 14 buy, which is the third buy. A little bit awkward, but it's probably more reason to start with him potentially if you're looking at someone around about this mark. In terms of queries and upside, the main query I think, which is consistent over the past few years, is will his role stay the same? It's probably because of the fact that we're scarred, or those of us who owned him from seasons ago when he was pushed forward by Clarko and marooned forward and really put a dent in his scoring ceiling. Is he going to be sent forward at times by Sam Mitchell? Not too sure that he will. I don't think there was really any occasion in 2022 where he was marooned forward. Probably more so in terms of the role is, will his intercept points be sapped with the development of Will Day and Granger Barras is probably the main query with mine. But that's probably just a wait and see. Like, you don't know until the season proper starts. Maybe have a look at that over the preseason. In terms of the verdict for me, there's no doubt he's a reliable primo. Had a career best average of 113.5 in 2022, which, perhaps that's his ceiling. And, given that it might be hard to replicate that, similar to what we were discussing with Paddy Cripps, there's that. And then there's the fact that his average in 2020 was 102.9. So there's a 11-point average differential there. Like, was it an out-of-the-box season? Is he going to regress now to that mean, like we speak about at times, close to that 102.9 mark? But I think nonetheless, he's still one to strongly consider. He's that price for a reason, and he's super reliable. He was someone that I brought in. I wanted to start last year and couldn't fit him into my side, and I was kind of kicking myself because I ended up bringing him in. I think with the first upgrade, I brought him in. So, yeah, he's someone that provides a bit of security at that price.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have him in my side currently, but he's one I am trying to potentially shuffle around to get in if I can. It's just it depends on who he's at the expense of, because I think there's some other guys that we're going to talk about shortly who I think probably offer a better option, which is
value.
nice. Better value, probably with a similar potential for scoring. So that's the hard part. I'm not too worried about his role. I think his role will stay the same. But I do think you probably, as you said, you're looking at a career best average of 113.5. Does he increase on that? It's hard to say. I probably wouldn't expect him to. The only thing, and this is purely speculative, that I do want to, that makes me think about him is with, I guess, the Hawks have had a bit of a clean out in their midfield. Does the ball spend more time in defense as a result for the Hawks? So is there more opportunity for scoring for Sicily? I don't know. There's just sort of food for thought, something to consider. But let's move on to Tom Stewart from the Cats, priming it at a price of $604K on the dot. He is massive value, I want to say, and great upside. He averaged 109.7 in 2022, but discounting his concussion game where he scored 39 against the Dogs, his true average is probably closer to 114, and thus should actually be priced alongside Sinclair and Sicily, who are obviously about 20K more expensive. So great bargain. Comes in with a 20 to 25K discount with that in mind. He has the round 13 bye, which is the second bye, which is only shared with the Suns, so will be great cover for the other weeks. Another little positive there, another little plus for Tommy Stewart. He absolutely smashes it consistency-wise as well. Great in rebounding, intercept role. He did have he had a game where he got tagged off memory last year and probably was one of his poorer scores, but overall has a really, really good ceiling and a pretty high floor as well. And especially goes to another level with those home games at GMHBA Stadium. Overall, he's in my side. He is, my D1 at this stage. And I think I've forgone others for him because he does present that bit of value. Very reliable. I didn't have him, I don't think, at all last year. So absolutely struggled to try and get him, especially after those big scores, because he does have that big ceiling, 161, 174, 187 last year. Lock and load.
Yeah, spot on. And I spotted as well our good friends at SuperCoach Insider. They put out a nice little stat, which we'll borrow here. So thank you to the crew there. They actually went through and collated his average at the MCG and GMHBA. And at the G last year, he averaged a 124.25 and GMHBA was 124.8, which is just massive. And the first 11 rounds, so he plays 5 games at the MCG, 2 at GMHBA, so that's 7 grounds that he absolutely smashes. And then the other 4 other games at obviously other grounds, 1 at Marvel and plays West Coast at Adelaide Oval and Interstate as well. So I think in terms of what's that, so well over, over half of his first 11 games, he's in a nice real spot to score well at grounds that he dominates at. So for me, I'll be starting with him. He's a lock and load for me. There's no way I can't start him. I didn't start with him last year and wish that I did, and I scrambled so hard to try and get him in. And it was so hard as well because every time I tried to get him in, he actually came through with those massive scores like the 161, the 174, the 187. So I was chasing my tail a bit there, but not this time. I'm starting with you, Stewie. Anyway, let's move on to the next prospect, and it is Sam Docherty, priced at 603.6K. Interesting prospect with Dockers. When I was looking through his stats and uncovered a little bit of something with regards to his role, more so than just looking at his raw data and scores. So in terms of value, slight overs when you take into account he's priced at an average of 109.6 despite averaging 99.9 over the past 3 years. So that's a almost 10 point average differential there on last year compared to his rolling 3-year average that we're formulating here. But his 2022 form is impressive once you factor in that he's battling Sard and Williams for points in that sort of equivalent rebounder role.
Yeah.
In terms of the buy, He's got the round 15 bye, which is the 4th bye. So, yeah, you could probably start him with a bit of confidence there and not worry about having to cover him due to that. In terms of his queries and upside, so whilst he may be slightly overpriced, there's obviously no doubting his reliability because he turned up in 14 of 22 games. And the most surprising thing here, which I was alluding to from the top, is that he surprised with 75% and 88% CBAs in round 22 and 23, where he scored a 121 and a 138 among his highest scores of the year. And I was thinking about it. Obviously, Walshy's going to be out for at least a minimum 4 games of the season. Could he be given midfield minutes again?
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder. So that's probably something to look at over the course of the preseason. If he gets a few more minutes in there, gets rotations through there, it really does elevate his ceiling because he's not obviously having to battle for points in defense alongside Sard and Williams. So that for me, almost, I'm not going to whack a must-start label on him as yet, but if that looks to be sort of the case that he's getting more midfield minutes, I will strongly consider him. I think potentially taking the spot of Dawson, who is one of my 2 starting primos in defence at the moment with Stewart. But yeah, what are your thoughts? Anything to add?
No, you've swayed me slightly to him. I didn't really consider him. I thought at his price probably slightly high. Not really value. Not really the value there that I want at this stage of the season. That being said, I think if he can get a couple of good scores in the first few rounds, if he can play that mid role, and if we can see in the preseason, I might move him around, might bring him in.
It could be a pod.
A bit of a pod there, I reckon. Got to keep him quiet, not let anyone else know.
Yeah, no one's tuning into this podcast anyway, so that's all good.
Just keep it between you and me, Dan.
We're not recording at all, actually. This is just a demo.
Yeah, no, and
keep it a secret.
I think you're right. I think that's something that I'm going to have to consider now, but I wouldn't advocate for him just yet.
No,
I'd want to see the preseason. So it's more of a watch, I want to say, and he probably comes in, as you said, as a bit of a. If I would bring him in, it would be at the expense of this next guy, and that is Jordan Dawson. He's sitting in my side, 603.1k, probably on par in terms of price expectations from last year, and even with his sort of scores of late, discounting his 2020 season when he wasn't yet in that rebounding defensive role at the Swans, he's averaged 105.3 in the past 2 seasons, which probably gets him around that 603 K mark. Anyway, it does have the round 14 bye, which is the 3rd bye, and was tagged at times late in the year in 2022, which we saw, which did impact his ability for the easy points that he was getting at times. He turned up in 13 of 2020. He turned up in 13 of 2022 games in 2022, underlining his reliability as a defensive primo. But I think the most impressive factor is that he has that high floor, having dipped below 80 just once, which is on par with Sinclair. And when you consider that, you've got Dawson, who was able to, rack up those easy points, didn't drop below 80, and he's coming at what, a 20K, 23K discount on Sinclair with relatively similar output when you think about it, I want to say.
Yeah.
More so as the floor, I guess. So you're going to get that security, and that's what you want in a primo, especially as a defender. You want that high floor. And he does come at a 20K discount, as we said, or 23K. I have questions over whether he'll elevate his scoring ceiling even more. I feel like he's going to have to take another step. But it could be good. So it could be a good slight bargain. I've got him in my side at this stage. Probably fighting out with Docherty now at this stage. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Dawson.
Yep. No, you've hit on all the right points there, and that's the reason why he's currently in my side. Didn't start with him last year. I was a bit wary about him. But yeah, came good and showed a lot of consistency there and in that role at the Crows. So no real competition. I think for me at the moment, it's a lock and load, pending any disasters. Moving on to the next guy, and it is Bailey Dale, priced at 561.1k. In terms of value, he's probably on par with price expectations and no real value there. For his buy, he has a round 15 buy, which is, of course, the 4th one. in terms of his queries and upside. So he did take his game to another level in 2022, lifting his 2021 average from 95.2 to 101.9, Fox FM. He scored over 100 in 13 of 22 games, but as was the case in both seasons, and we spoke about this during the season as well, was the fact that his ceiling is rather limited. And he scored above 120 just twice in 22 games in 2022 and only 3 times prior to that in 2021. So the verdict for me is unless he can up that scoring ceiling, I don't think he's worth the investment. He's got sort of cap potential given that. I mean, the upside is there. There is a chance that he could elevate his ceiling, but for me, he's always going to be battling the likes of Caleb Daniel for easy rebound points. I think he did wrestle back the lion's share, as we like to refer to it as, in terms of kick-ins. So that did elevate his ceiling, and probably speaks to that the 101.9 average that he had compared to the 95.2. But apart from that, there's nothing sexy about him, to use that term. He's not doing anything to me. He's not sexy enough. So I'm looking the other way.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing as well, because I agree. Bailey Dale isn't. I'm not considering him, but when you look at his, I guess, stats compared to from last year versus Dawson, who comes in, almost 40K more expensive, or over 40K more expensive, they turned up in the exact same number of games. They both turned up in 13 games. So it's an interesting thing. You're almost getting a discount. I do think his issue is that lack of a ceiling. You're getting a nice floor, but you're not really getting someone who's going to necessarily win you a head-to-head. So looking at Dawson's numbers from last year, he scored over 120, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 times. Over 120. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times over 130, and then 3 times over 140, which is not what you're going to get from Dale. So I think that's where you're getting, it's in a sense, it's why it's the funny thing. It's like how we're saying, you almost want to not pay the 20 extra K for Sinclair and go with Dawson, but you do want to pay the extra 40K despite the fact that they turned up in the same amount of games, because you're getting a bit of a higher ceiling between Dale and Dawson. So that's where I think that's the difference in that sense. I don't think you're not getting value with Dale. You're getting you are getting consistency, and you're getting consistency with Dawson, but you're getting also a higher ceiling as well.
Yep. No, spot on. And that's the thing as well, isn't it? When it comes to paying the extra bit of cash, it helps you in week to week as well. If you're playing for leagues, if you've got someone with a higher ceiling, obviously it gives you a greater chance to win your week to week head to head matches. So that also helps as well. But yeah, that's that. Who else we got, Liam?
Yeah, we've got from the D's, Angus Brayshaw, 550.3K. And if you take into consideration his 3-year average, combining for just 82.6, he's very massively overpriced. But you've got to look at his, I guess, season last year. He's priced at about 100 average. But we could probably pin down his lower combined 3-year average due to just the fact that he's played so many roles over the journey. And I think he's finally settled down into that, hopefully for his sake, settled down into that backline sort of role, I guess playing in midfield as well.
Yeah.
He was swung from his defensive SuperCoach pig role into the midfield when he played the last 6 games, which was predominantly giving him time in the engine room for the Ds. But he still managed to up his average from 98 to 105 over those 6 games in isolation. So there's no real, I don't think there's a big fear that he's not going to, that really affects his scoring. He could be a bit of a pod. I'm not considering it, to be perfectly honest. The value is okay, with 2022 viewed in isolation as a breakout year in terms of SuperCoach, but probably is priced at overs when you look at his longer term average. You could consider him as a cost saver, but I don't think it'd be at the top of the list. I can't see him breaking into the top sort of 6 defenders at this stage, especially when you're looking at players like Stewart, Sicily, Sinclair, and even Dawson to an extent, and potentially Docherty. I think it's worth paying up in this case. I think you're better off, and there's potentially even better value at lesser price as well, and probably potentially better scoring output. So he is at this stage a no for me.
Yep. No, I totally agree on all counts there. And then you got to factor in as well, like guys that didn't play full seasons as well that could potentially, if he is swung to, play that rebounding role, there's Salem there as well for the Ds in terms of that role. And the fact that he is swung around as well does really play with his consistency from week to week. Would prefer to pay up for a bit of security in the likes of Stewart, Doc, Dawson, all those guys, 100%. Let's move on to the next guy, and it is Aaron Hall, this dreaded player. He's priced at 538.6K, and I know he's going to rope some people in. He's a bit of a trap at times.
He always does.
Yeah, but you could potentially see it. And in terms of value, so he does come at a 34K discount on his starting price in 2022, but of course for good reason. Buy, he does have the round 15 buy, which is the fourth buy. The career is an upside, so what's there to say? It's pretty self-explanatory. Injury. The bloke has that like plastered across his forehead as a tattoo, Dusty style. Actually, Dusty doesn't have a tattoo on his forehead, but he could. This guy probably could. He literally has the durability of one ply toilet paper, I reckon.
Yeah.
Like it's just one of those things where you haven't got that security. And any moment your finger's going to go through the one ply toilet paper and end in disaster. So,
Dwight, why is the toilet paper only half a ply?
Well, I'm sorry. Is that not good enough for your anus? Don't get me started on how coddled the modern anus is.
there's that, and then the fact that Clarko is his new coach. Is there the guarantee that he's going to keep that Seagull role? Does Clarko potentially earmark him for a different role? Who knows? It's probably something to have a look at over the course of the preseason in itself. But for me, he's just not worth the risk at the price point. If he was cheaper, I'm talking like about a 400K, probably even so, maybe a little bit too much, but I might be tempted if he was a bit cheaper. However, the risk to reward is huge and just way out of reach, I think. Although having said that, if you're one for taking, likes to live dangerously, as Austin Powers says, he could be a bit of a pod for you and could be a nice little sort of leg up on the rest of the competition at the expense of, your own sanity and taking a big risk. He is a proven scorer, however, so he does have history of a big ceiling and big floor, given he averaged 105 in 20 games in 2021 or 114 in 18 games, discounting the 2 injury-affected games. I think he got knocked down in one and went off injured in the other. And 16 of those games were 100-plus scores, and only one score was below 80, again, discounting 2 injury-affected games. But must say, if you are going to select him, don't come crying to us if it ends in absolute misery and a wasted trade. We warned you last year, and a lot of people jumped on him because he was a bit of a bargain. Put in a couple of good scores and then got injured, came back, injured again. So, yeah, for me, just bypass him, I think. Save yourself the trouble.
He's a hard one to read, I feel. Last year's scores, he scored a 153, also had the injury affected 18, and his next lowest score was a 70. So he does have the ability to score quite well. So I can see why people are tempted. I personally think, because trades are so scarce, I think it's not worth the risk so early on with him. You're going to have to keep a trade up your sleeve knowing that he's probably going to break down at some stage. Yeah. And I think as well, the Clarko factor, what does that do to his role? It's not worth the risk, in my opinion. Next up, let's move on. Let's get into it.
Yep.
Next up, we've got from my boy.
Ooh.
Love him. Mason Redman, Red Dog.
The Red Dog.
And I really wanted to pick him. I really want him in my side. I just can't do it. 510.9K. I don't think it's massive value at his price. He does have the ability to score really quite well, and we saw last year when he was left absolutely unattended by North Melbourne, he scored a 176, a 152 against the Suns, a 144 against St Kilda, and then a bit of a drop off to 113 against Richmond. We saw some really big scores, and I think he has that big upside, but I don't know if he does it consistently enough. in the same period, his lowest score was a 47. His next lowest was a 49, which was injury affected. And the next one was a 55. So I think there is the risk that he kind of gets tagged and made to play a bit more accountably. There's obviously also the risk of Brad Scott coming in and changing up the roles a little bit. I don't think we have too many players that would play his role. He's a sort of slightly taller, small forward, small defender, I want to say. Probably more of a medium defender, but sort of that rebounding medium defender. He has that different role to Ridley that I think we did see. He's more that rebounding defender. Ridley's more, we saw him play as a tall lockdown as the team was required rather than as an interceptor, which I think is really what Ridley should be playing. The kickouts are probably the most interesting difference. Ridley and Redman are both really great kicks. Depending on how Brad Scott wants to play it, I would, if I was coach, I would have Redman taking kick-ins. I think he's more aggressive with his kick, and I think it sets the game up a bit better. Whereas Ridley's a really good kick, but I think he plays it a bit too safe. So that's beside the point. But
I reckon you're auditioning for an assistant coaching role.
Yeah, no, can you get me a job here? Anyway, but my point is more so I think it'll come down to that there's those two sort of schools of thought there about the kickouts. And they were battling it out last year for who sort of took that lion's share, as we like to say. I think he's a bit of a nice pod in terms of the verdict here, and he's shown some good scoring ability. But I think at this price point, there's better options. We'll chat about probably two of them after this, but I really want Redmond to do well. I really want to have to pick him later in the season.
Yeah, when you're reading out those big ceiling type scores, it reminded me of obviously with the height, intercepting role of like a Tom Stewart clone. Yeah. So like imagine if he can step into that role on a consistent basis and be as impactful as him from week to week. Like, he picks himself if that's the case. There's a bit of room for improvement there if that does happen. So, he's one to watch. I think nonetheless, and I can see him potentially sliding into your team, Liam. I would love to live vicariously through if you do select him. So, we'll wait and see. We'll watch this space.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Let's move on to the next guy, and it is Hayden Young, the aptly named Young, who is a bit of a nice little youngster at Freo. He's priced at 508.2K. At that price point, no real value compared to last year, especially, but the upside could potentially be there. His buy, he does have the first buy, unfortunately, round 12. And yes, the upside in terms of that, could he potentially take his game to another level? He did increase his 2021 average from 76.9 to 92.3 last year. But, he only eclipsed the ton in 6 of 20 games, which does turn me away from punting on him because I did like him last year and I was thinking about starting him, but I think he did have a couple of niggles potentially in the preseason, which turned me off. But if he can elevate his ceiling, he could be a nice, shrewd selection. Does come with a bit of a risk of him hovering around that same average of 92.3 if he does have a bit of I think it's his third year blues. But, Freo should potentially be around at the same mark or if not improve. So hopefully he improves with them if you do select him. But he does have that limited ceiling, which again does turn me away. But the big reward could be big if it pays off. He's just... I guess the main reason is, he could be a big pod because he's going to be shadowed, no doubt, by the next player that we're about to discuss at a very similar price point. And that's probably a good segue for you, Liam.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like Young. I'd like to pick him, but I don't think, again, he's got enough form behind him to back him over some of the other players that we've discussed. And as you said, Nick DAICOS, 502.5K. Second-year player. It's very rare that I think you pick a second-year player who's played that full season. In terms of value, he's such a hard one to peg, I reckon. If viewed in terms of his huge upside, his price could be unders, believe it or not. But probably it's honestly a really tough one. Again, I'm just going to try and get his numbers up while I talk about him a bit more. But he has that round 14 buy, which is the third one. So does offer some, cover a little bit for the early buys. And And we know that he obviously dominated as a junior, as a pure mid. And we did see flashes of that brilliance, but more so played off a half-back line in his first season at the Pies. If he does move into the engine room on a more permanent basis, like many would expect him to, the sky is the absolute limit for Nick DAICOS and his scoring. I mean, he scores in 2022. So his ceiling scores, he had 1, 2, 3, 4 scores above 125. He had a 163, a 143, a 129, a 125, and sort of towards a little bit towards the end of the season. Yeah. The only concern I do have is he did have some lower scores as well. So are we paying up for him? I do have him in my side currently because I do think there's a good level of upside to him. I think an extra year and another year in his early career gives him a bit more confidence. And I think he might get a bit more of that opportunity to play through the midfield. In terms of the verdict, he does lose his DPP, but that could quickly be reinstated if he does get more mid-time. And there really hasn't been a more dominant first year since your boy in Walsh. And if he is if that's anything to go by, when he did manage to lift his average from 86.9 to 101 in his second season, then watch out. I'd want to watch his roll over the preseason at 502.5K. He's sort of a little bit awkwardly priced, not awkwardly priced, but you're going to have to make sure you have some cash so you can up him if you do have him in your side, or look to downgrade him to potentially the next guy on this list.
Yes. And before we delve into that, it's so funny, a second-year player being priced at over 500K.
Yeah.
Like I can't remember the last time, potentially maybe Barlow, but I don't think because Barlow was taken out of, what was it, Coburg or Werribee, one of those teams in the VFL. So it wasn't a traditional draftee, like a young draftee coming through the system like DAICOS. So to be priced at that price point in his second year is just astounding.
Nuts. Yeah.
And like prior to Walsh, I guess the next best player was probably the Pig, Clary. His first year he averaged 70.3, and then in his second year in 2017, he jumped up to 111.5.
Yeah,
so could we see a similar sort of jump with DAICOS? Maybe not to that, but who knows? Could be to that level. But
DAICOS's average in 2022 was 91.3. So
it's not unachievable.
Yeah,
that's for sure. But yeah, I'm very much the same. He's in my side as well. On that potential alone, like he's almost, even though he's a midfielder and everyone says they're a dime a dozen, he's a once in a generation type player. He's got it all. Like we saw, he can play off the half back. He's got composure. He's got skill. Yeah, he's something special. So if you don't start with him and you've obviously spent that cash elsewhere, you're going to have to scramble to trade out someone else of equivalent value to try and get him in. But again, he's at that awkward price point. So there probably is, I can see reason as to why you would look elsewhere. And looking elsewhere, there is another player similarly priced with equally as good upside, I reckon. And it is Harry Himmelberg, priced at 499K on the dot. He's got huge value, as we only really need to pay attention to his scores post round 9 when he was shifted into that defensive intercept role, where his true average off the back of that is 118.6 over that stretch compared to the full season average, which is 90.6 he is priced at. So that's what's that, 28 on the dot average differential over that stretch compared to, like, obviously the full season average accounts for when he was playing at forward. So it is a little bit of a diamond in the rough there, I think, out of anyone that I've sort of had a look at and delved into the stats for.
Yes, there he is. My diamond in the rough.
That's him? That's the clown we've been waiting for!
So I'm looking very, very closely at him, but yeah, it may come down to potentially Dakes or Himmelberg. In terms of the buy, he does have the round 15 buy, which is the fourth buy. The main query for him is he's got a new coach in Kingsley. So again, the role, will it stay the same under a new coach? But why would you change something that was successful over the course of 2022? Yeah. So you'd think it should stay the same unless he becomes more of a swing man. He was at times during the year, which frustratingly lowered his ceiling at times. When I had him in my team, you did as well, Liam. But yeah, you would think that the inclusion of the highly touted key forward in Cadman should potentially shore up that defensive role heading into and solidify that defensive role heading into 2023. So that's the one thing that he has going for him in terms of his security in that same role. And yeah, for the verdict wise, he probably could be viewed as some of the best value available in defense off the back of that, that average in that little snapshot there where he is playing purely as that intercept defender. Only query is if he maintains, that same role like I mentioned, but watch across the preseason for any changes in role. Otherwise, if it is the same, I'd be very tempted to almost lock and load. He comes in at a massive discount because at 118, actually I might throw it to you, Liam. I'll just pull up my little spreadsheet here. But yeah, is there anything different that you wanted to add?
No, I think he has that forward and defensive eligibility, which is also super helpful, potentially meaning that you could throw him forward later in the season if he if you do decide to pick him, and you can then pick up another defender a bit later because forwards are often a little bit harder to pick. I think looking at his scores after round 9, his lowest was a 74 against Sydney, which I'm pretty sure was one of the games where he was thrown forward. Next lowest was an 80, which was the first week in defense, and the next one was an 84 in the round 23 against Fremantle. So, I think that speaks to it, to be perfectly honest. Some massive scores in there, a 187 against North, a 126 against Brisbane, 114 against Collingwood. Has the ability to score really, really well.
Yep, and just quickly, just play up the little spready I've got here. Let's spread the spready, and it has said that if he was priced at his, I guess I'm going to call it the true average of 118.6, he would be the highest priced defender in the game at the moment because Jack Sinclair, who's top priced at 626.2, average 113.7. So he would be priced around about that maybe 660, 650 mark if he was priced there. So with that in mind, he's almost 150K below what he should be priced at. So something to keep in mind.
Yep, exactly. Now let's move on to the mid prices. And first up, we've got Elliot Yeo, 337K from West Coast, has the round 14 bye, just the third bye. And in terms of value, he comes in at a bit of a discount, obviously due to his injuries. Huge upside as a playing cash cow or stepping stone, though, is, I want to say, slightly awkwardly priced at 337K. So not one that I'm personally considering, but is probably, it's a true mid-pricer there at that price. In terms of queries and upside, he has suffered from osteitis pubis, limiting him to just the 5 games in 2022 for an average of just 68, which included 3 injury-affected games. If you do discount those games, though, he did score 61, 88, and 102 for a true average of 83.66. In terms of the verdict, if he is declared fit with a full preseason, he would be hard to resist given his historical average when at full flight. You'd expect him to be guaranteed best 22, but his huge risk reward given his last 3 seasons read 5, 12, and 10 games played. I mean, all right, he scores 100. If he makes 150K, he comes in at about 480, 490.
Yep.
Sort of almost, I suppose you could still push. He's not really a keeper at that price. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So we still I'd say it's possible. You're not picking him as a keeper at that price, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to do the maths in my head. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. It's a huge risk reward, like you said.
Yeah.
And it's like, given that he's injury affected seasons over the past 3 years, doesn't really fill me with confidence. I did select him initially. Then I saw that, read into his stats a little bit closer, and I was like, nah. That's kind of turned me off. And if he was under the 300K mark, I would be very tempted.
Yeah.
But that 40K buffer is almost, is that awkward price, as you mentioned. So for me, I will be bypassing him because there is another guy who comes in at almost exactly 60K cheaper, which we'll jump into very shortly, that takes his place in my side. Let's move into the next player, and it is Hunter Clark, priced at 315.2K. No real value there. For him, it's just risk versus reward. Bye, he's got the round 12 bye, which is, of course, the awkward first one. And he has been riddled with injury, which delayed his start to the season and limited him to 8 games last season for an average of 57.3. Did show glimpses of a sizable ceiling at times in 2021 with 4 of his 13 games, 100-plus point games with small stints in the middle, which was, pair those two together and it looks like it's a little bit of something to go on. But has long been mooted to eventually move into the midfield full-time. And North Melbourne actually did chase him rather hard during the trade period for a reason. So you'd assume that he's fit, would have passed a fitness test with them in order for them to, I think it went down to the wire eventually the last day of the trade period. But the Saints wanted to keep him. So surely they have earmarked a decent role for him. And could 2023 be the year? Who knows? Like, I think for me, the upside is there. But again, injury history, he does sit at that awkward price, very much like Elliot Yeo, for that range of the risk that he does present.
Yeah.
So likewise, that with the uncertainty with his role, that's just another reason to sit back. And I just prefer to watch this space.
He's one of those players that I think we always talk about in some form. But yeah, I'm not on board, to be perfectly honest. Moving on to the player you discussed earlier, you alluded to earlier, and that is Jack Bowes, 277.5K. Obviously moved from the Suns down to Geelong in an interesting trade. But in terms of value, I mean, he was real value. Into that trade too. But anyway, let's move on. He started 2022 priced at 450.9K. So he's a massive bargain to the tune of 173K in a discount. But will he play? I mean, you'd expect him to, considering you'd expect him to, considering he was courted by Geelong so hard during the course of the season. Has that round 13 bye, which is nice. Obviously, he's rated by the Cats, but the question is always going to remain: is he merely depth, or is he going to get that role? Who does he push out of the best 22 of the Premiership side? Realistically, what about his role? He did want to carve out a mid spot, despite being pigeonholed into defence or as a defender by Dew at the Suns. Just big questions there. If he can snag and maintain a spot in the best 22, I think it could be a really big bargain at that price. Averaged 82.8 and 84 in 21 and 22. So big watch over the preseason and make sure he's got that role. He is sitting in my side currently, which is a little tough to swallow because it's going to be hard to move him up if I need to. So it's a big structural. Yeah, it's a big structural kind of hole if he isn't in Geelong's side, to be honest.
Yeah, he's almost like I can't recall what Will Brodie was priced at, but I assume he was around about this. Yeah, it was about this off memory. So super awkward. Like I think the one saving grace was started McGovern thinking he was going to have a breakout. Then he had a couple of crap ones, got injured, traded him down to Will Brodie. So if you're trading down to a target, like almost you need to pick Jack Bowes with another player in mind that's sort of next tier down. So you're not having to find cash to trade up, especially if you're going to the season with no cash in the bank. It makes it awfully hard, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly. And I think at that price, you are really going to be limited in what you can do if you need to move him on. But there are, however, there are a few bargains that could be had. So let's move into a bit of a segue there in terms of going into the rookies. Because there are a few mature ages here that are coming back from injury, coming back from not taking their vaccine shot, so on and so forth. So let's start off with that reference right there. And it is Liam Jones, priced at 228K. I'm a little bit annoyed as a Carlton supporter, obviously, because he just shut over his reputation at the club and had to move back to his old club in the Bulldogs. So in terms of value, I mean, he is okay value. I mean, if you want to look at that, but very low upside. We do know he's an intercept defender, but not of the kind like a Tom Stewart or even like a Mason Redman. Like he doesn't do it consistently enough or with a high ceiling. He does have the round 15 bye, which is the fourth bye.
Yeah.
And he averaged 69.1, 72.1, and 66.1 across the 3 seasons prior to 2022. He was obviously been out of the game for 12 months. The main query is, can he recapture his top form? How's his fitness being out of the game? I don't think he was allowed to play at any level. I think there was maybe a ban that was lifted at one stage. But I think because he didn't have the vaccination, he wasn't allowed. So, yeah, I mean, you almost need to look at his preseason as like he's returning from like being off his feet, like an ACL injury type thing. So will he be able to regain the full fitness? And then another query, like how's he going to gel and fit in the Dogs lineup? So yeah, those are sort of the main queries. Presents, yes, as an okay cash cow, but higher end cash cow. And at that price point, I think you really want someone that flashes a bit more of a ceiling, can make you cash quicker. I think he might be a bit of a slow burn. Will no doubt make you cash. But yeah, he's going to score what you expect from a key defender. His intercept marking is probably the main source of scoring, but high scoring fluctuations makes him less reliant as an on-field scorer, especially as well.
Yeah. Not a fan, to be honest.
No.
I think at his age, is 31, the year off is going to be harder for him. I look back to, and obviously this is different. Each player is obviously different, but I look back to like when the Essendon players had the year off with the suspension, some of those ones that were that 30, 31, 32, they really struggled to come back. I think the year off didn't really help them as much as some would have thought. So I do question how he's going to go. You assume he would fit in the Dogs lineup. They have been sort of wanting sort of a key defender. But yeah, I'm probably looking elsewhere, to be honest. Moving on to Hayden Crozier, 218K. He starts the year at a huge discount compared to his 2022 starting price of 379.4K, obviously due to injury. Has some nice scoring and cash generation upside as well. Has that round 12 bye, which is the first one. And in terms of queries and upside, I guess injury restricted him to 5 games in 2022 and has only played a further 10 and 14 in the 2 seasons prior to that. So the real question is always going to be about how his durability is and how he can cement a spot in the side. That's going to be the big question marks for him. I'd definitely watch him over the preseason. He did average 65.1 across his last 3 seasons, 49.6, 69.7, 76.1. So he can score, but what is his role? Is it forward? Is it defender? There's a lot of questions. There's probably some others that I'd look at that cheaper than him that I'd probably consider first, but he, depending on his role, he could be one that you could look to downgrade from a Jake Bowers. Potentially, but you'd really need to know what his role is and how cemented he is in the best 22.
Yeah, for me, he was fleetingly in my side when I was first constructing it, but yeah, there's that question over his role. Don't know how he's going to play. I mean, we've already got Bradley. If he's playing in defence, Bradley Dale down there, who we spoke of with reference to the helmet, the little midget in defence there. As well, stealing points of each other and kick-ins and whatnot. So I don't know. And if he's played up forward, he's just not an attractive option at all. So for me at this stage, I'll be looking elsewhere for sure. Moving on to Nick Caulfield. He's priced at 208.8K. He is good value and does have nice upside as a cash cow, considering he did average 63.2 and 79.4 in both 21 and 2020. He does have the round 12 bye, which is first up. Again, a little bit awkward. But like his teammate Hunter Clark, is another touted to eventually step into the engine room over time. And like Clark, durability has been his main stumbling block, with injury wiping out his entire 2022. He's been super unlucky. I think there was a couple of issues there where he copped a knee to the head and stuff. And yeah, poor bloke. Verdict, I think, yeah, if fully fit, he's no doubt he's going to play 22 games, much like Hunter Clark. So job security is sound. But yeah, durability is the big issue. And for me, just want to see his role under Ross Lyon. I don't know where he fits into his game plan. Big watch over the preseason, because he is someone at that price point that probably attracts me the most out of anyone that we've spoken about around about this range. But there's a few question marks to be answered still.
Yep. Definitely. It's hard to to know with obviously with Ross Lyon. So probably a watch and see. At that elevated price, you are getting some job security, which is nice. Yeah, it's a hard one to pick. Hopefully can look into him and hopefully presents as a nice option. But at a bit of a cheaper price there, at 192.7k, and as a defense and midfield option, we do have Josh Gota from North Melbourne. Good value and nice upside here, I think. Obviously, the queries would be new coach with Clarko coming in. Where does he fit into the plans? Is he in the best 22? Darcy Tucker and Griffin Logue also were brought into the team, so there would be competition for spots. And look, I've read a little bit from North training, and they do reckon he is impressing in the preseason so far. He's really put on some good size. And they reckon he'll play a wing sort of halfback role alongside the likes of Perez. Their North supporters are still questioning whether he would be West 22, and it really depends on what Clarko would see, what his plan is. So we'll have to look at the preseason games to see whether he does cement a spot there. But he did play well in his one senior outing in 2022 with a score of 70 in round 23. If he can break into the Roos best 22, he could be a very nice cash cow and that bonus DPP. So definitely watch and see with him.
Yep, like it. Yeah, he's a little bit of a smoky there, and especially in the VFL in the back sort of month and a half of the season. In terms of these are just fantasy points, but it gives you a bit of perspective because it would correlate with SuperCoach to some extent. But he scored 83, 96, 81, 61, dropped down to a 34, but then back up to a 92 and a 78. So he did get a little bit of nice form there going in the VFL in the back part. So, yeah, if you can cement a best 22 spot, he is a must get, I think, potentially at that price. But another guy who is a must get because he comes with a bit of experience, and he's playing for a different team this time around, and it is Conor McKenna, the Irishman. He's back this time for the Lions, and he's priced at 167.5k. It speaks for itself. High value, high upside. We know what he brought to the table when he was playing for your mob, Liam, at the Dons. Good rebound defender. Feels, you'd think, a need to some extent at the Lions, but there is a little bit of competition there with the emergence of Coleman, Kitty Coleman. And then you've still got Dan Rich down there, who has a few durability issues and stuff there. So I'd like to see how McKenna's going to fit into the side, who he pushes out, or if he's going to have a bit of a different role compared to what he had at the Dons. Like, I don't know, you might be able to speak more to this, but could he potentially push more up towards the wing as opposed to being marooned at the half-back line? But yeah, he's in terms of, his time at the Dons, when he finished up back in 2020, he did average 60.8, 79.8 and a 74.3 across the 3 seasons, or his last 3 years there. So, yeah, it makes me wonder, he was part of a two-pronged attack at the Dons back in the day. Given the fact that he was courted by a number of clubs, apart from the Lions, says to me that they have guaranteed a role to him to some extent, unless they've just flashed the cash and said, come to us. Then there's a lure there of obviously winning a flag because they are pretty strong going into this season. So it does suggest a best 22 role there. Did play some Gaelic back home in Ireland, so fitness levels probably shouldn't be much of a query. We'll get in a full preseason reportedly. And for me, he's a monitor over the preseason just in terms of the role. But other than that, lock and load.
Yeah, interesting one. I was a bit surprised that he picked the Lions just based off the halfback role. He did always apparently want to play as a forward.
Okay.
So I don't know. I can't even see him playing as a forward, to be honest. The wing role, I think, could suit him with his skills, or his skill set, the speed, and sort of his kicking penetration. I'd want to see the role. I'd want to see the role, but I do think as long as he's playing, I think he's a lock and load at that price because he's a ready-made player who should have no concerns over scoring. In terms of next player, teammate Darcy Wilmot, 123.9k. Value is huge, upside is huge, starts cheaper than his 2022 starting price of 139.8k, despite the fact that he actually played last season. Obviously not in the season proper, but did make his debut in the finals for the Lions, obviously, and impressed so much that he maintained his spot with scores of 52, 61, and 73. Obviously, those scores didn't affect his price, which is what we like to see.
Yeah.
Main query is whether he can maintain a spot in the Lions' best 22. But given he did carve out a position for himself during probably the most important part of the season, speaks volumes. So I would be shocked if he didn't wasn't named in the 22 come round 1. Has the first buy in round 12, and in terms of the verdict, he should be one of your first rookies picked across any line. There's low cost, no risk, high reward. I would lock and load, assuming he gets named for round 1.
Yep, done and dusted. Lock and load and throw away the key, 100%. Another guy who is a lock and load, who would have played quite a few games for West Coast, is Campbell Chesser. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Cheeser? Who knows? But he is priced the same as Wilmot at 123.9K, and comes with a little bit of a sneaky DPP option as well, which is a bonus. He is huge value, huge upside. Like I mentioned, he was on the cusp of a debut in round 1 last season before injury derailed his entire year. Should be best 22 if fit, and comes with huge reps. Probably up there with Wilmot in terms of lock and load rookies. Like I mentioned, the DPP is an absolute bonus. Monitor across the preseason for role and for scoring output. But other than that, have him on your bench because he could even potentially be an on-field rookie, and he should skyrocket in price.
Yeah, nice one. Another option at the Suns is Charlie Constable, another player that I feel like we spoke about every year. 123.9K, defensive and mid eligible, which is nice to see. He's high value, huge upside, but obviously the question is, will he play? He only played the 1 game and as a sub in 2022, had injury issues at times, but was an absolute stats pig at VFL level. As we all know, he was at Geelong as well. Upside for him is obviously big. As we saw, his points per minute were through the roof in the senior games he got at the Cats. So hopefully he just gets to play. That's what we need. 123.9K would be absolutely incredible to have him as a rookie for us. Obviously monitor him across the preseason, but he would be a top rookie and cash cow option if he can break into the best 22 and maintain his role.
Yep. Yeah, it comes with that juicy DPP as well as defender, midfielder. So, yeah, lock and load if he does get games. The other guy who is similar sort of vein to Campbell Chesser as well, that would have played quite a few games early on due to just other injuries in defence for the Pies, is Charlie Dean, priced again at 123.9, and he comes in at high value and a quite nice upside for a defensive tall.
Yeah.
Was in line to play early games due to injuries. Again, like I mentioned, at the Pies until he himself sustained an injury and was ruled out for the entirety of 2022. I think it was a foot injury, an ankle injury or something of that nature. So does he figure in the Pies best 22 at full strength is probably the main query heading into 2023. Could be nice value if he does play early on, but again, as a key position defender, his scoring will fluctuate wildly with a very low ceiling, you'd think. So cash generation will be slow and, of course, capped. So keep an eye on him anyway over the course of the preseason.
Yeah, it could be a nice rookie for the bench rookie. They're just going to, slow, as you said, slow burn. But yeah, I think wasn't he 102K last year?
He was.
So I think that was why we were all a bit more tempted by him. But 123.9, you're a little less excited by him, knowing that he is a key PD. A key position defender. But now, I feel like it's not preseason rookie talk if we don't talk about this guy. And it is Will Gould.
Who? Is he a
I swear he does not exist. 123.9K, as always. They should discount him, seriously. They should be 102.
Yeah. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put it like little pop-ups and stuff. I'm going to put a little pop-up here of, Homer Simpson when he was Mr. X putting the hood on his head? That's him, because no one knows who he is. If he exists, we just know that apparently he wears a Swans jumper, but he hasn't at senior level, not yet, despite being in the game for how many years? He's almost
I swear he is
otherworldly. He's just another being, extraterrestrial.
I swear, he's been around for like 10 years. Like, come on.
He's
Give
like
him
an
a game.
ongoing gag. Like
Yeah.
the Swans don't want to delist him because he's just an ongoing joke. Poor dude.
Well, value question mark, upside question mark. We don't know.
Existence question mark.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I always have him in my side. It's not a preseason without Will Gould in your side.
Exactly.
Queries and upside. He is the absolute yeti of SuperCoach. No one can verify if he actually exists. Can he finally make his debut? Who knows?
Yeah.
A must watch, just to see that he exists. First and foremost, and then if he is named, if people don't bring him in, I'm going to be really annoyed. He deserves it. We should all get around him.
Everyone get around him and make him the most picked player in SuperCoach. Just keep the gag going. You know, like back in the day, like there's an ongoing gag about Relton Roberts. Like, oh yeah, why don't you pick Relton Roberts? Why don't you pick Will Gould? Like, what a gag that would be. So don't worry about bloody Wardlaw or anyone else that you're going to be going, or Nick DAICOS or anyone else.
Let's be honest,
everyone get around
my
him.
first pick in every year.
Absolutely. At that price point. Actually, if his price wasn't capped, you'd think he'd probably be below 100K at this stage. Like, it'd just keep going down if it could. It should be 100. Like,
He should be
just to
102
nice.
at this stage.
Yeah, geez.
Anyway.
I reckon we're both more chance of getting games for the Swans than what Will Gould is, and we're not even on their list. Let's do that. Let's make it an aim of nominating for the mid-season rookie draft, and we'll get drafted we'll get selected just to rub it into the poor bloke.
Poor guy.
Imagine that.
Poor guy.
Classic. Well, we'll wait and see for him. That's all you can say.
That's all you can say.
But that does round us out for another huge episode, and hopefully it goes without saying it's helped you better build your team in the early days. Another big episode, but thanks again for sticking around with us and for tuning in. But on to our next episode, Liam, just forecasting ahead. What do we have on the horizon for the next preseason analysis episode?
Next up, I think it'll be the most interesting weeks. It'll be probably a shorter episode just by virtue of the fact that it's the least
populated?
The least players. Yeah, least populated. Obviously, we're talking about the rucks here, but I think it'll be the most interesting one because we haven't got the set and forgets.
Yeah, exactly right. Previous years, it's been like, it's just Gaundy or it's Gaundy. Like virtually, it's just like it's those two lock and load. Whereas now, it's almost a good thing because it's thrown a spanner in the works there. There's an extra bit of strategy. People actually have to do a bit of homework as to who they select in the rucks. So hopefully that's where we come in. And we can run through and cover possible combinations that you could take, strategies around, potentially forward ruck swings and the like, because there are a couple of options there to explore potentially. But as always, if you're keen to join the discussion, we encourage you to do so by commenting below this video if you're watching us on YouTube. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I did put in the description for our first couple of episodes, the two-parter for the midfield discussion. We are looking to up our subscription to, we're hoping to get to 500 subs come the start of the season proper. It's a lofty expectations, no doubt, but like to set the bar high. So
we do.
We're making a call out. If you can help us there, just subscribe down to, this, I'll be that stupid person pointing to the bottom corner, and it's probably the opposite to what I'm actually pointing at. But there is a little button there. Push that and you can subscribe. And there's a benefit as well. You get notifications, which you can activate, which will alert you when we put up podcasts and different episodes and bonus episodes and all that sort of stuff throughout the season. Or alternatively, you can shoot us your comments and questions across our social channels. So Liam, I'll throw it your way.
Yep. On Twitter, you can find us at @supercoach_edge, Damon at DamoJ88, myself at Liam Evans _95, and on Facebook and Instagram, if you search SuperCoach Edge, and TikTok as well, actually. So search SuperCoach Edge, you will find us there.
Well, that's it. That's another action-packed episode, and very, very juicy, very meaty. There's a lot of meat in the bone, as the saying goes, with these past couple of episodes. So, apologies for the length, because we do understand that your time is money, but as is ours as well. And we're just nuffies, and we enjoy it as much as you do out there. So, look out for the next episode. We'll be releasing that next up. covering the rucks. So thanks again for tuning in and returning our way to catch our content. So we'll catch you on the next episode. We'll see you then.